Okay, welcome to Joe Blow. This morning, you asked, this is episode 13.
Naturally.
Unlucky 13, naturally, for you.
Yeah.
And we just went over 1,000 streams, which is awesome.
That's huge.
For me. Just want to talk about myself for a bit.
Yeah.
And just say you're not nervous. Then the other thing was that I checked the stats and it said that 83% of people listen from the start to the end. Stephen Bartlett, the king of podcasting, he's at only at 87.
Wait, go back. How many percent for you?
83.
Listen
huge.
Start to finish.
Yeah.
What are your... How long is the podcast? How long are you editing at?
It's usually an hour that podcasts go for. Some have gone to
pretty good.
I did one 2 weeks ago with a sex therapist. It was so good. And on the back of that, I've got another lady that wants to come on, and she's a kink therapist. She's into all kinky stuff and that, like really like pineapples up the bum and all that sort of stuff.
So you're really looking forward to
Yeah, I'm hoping Richie does some trials. She brings stuff in and that'll be X-rated. So, Jem, is it Jem or Jen?
Genevieve.
Yeah, that's what I thought. You said Jem out there.
No, I said Jen.
Oh, maybe you were slurring your words.
No, maybe you need to get your ears checked.
What?
Huh?
What?
Jen.
What?
With a G, Genevieve.
Okay, got it.
Actually, and Genevieve in Latin means lady of the people.
Really?
Mm.
Well, I don't know if this is going to be Lady of the People, this podcast. Tell me, I don't even know where to go with this. I've been reading these notes for like 3 days. And I'm like, where do I go with this? There's heaps of parts that I'm interested in selfishly. But then I feel like...
Can I tell you what? Can I cut you off?
No, you can't. I'm the boss. What?
Until
so I've got all this stuff for you, and I'm take me first to. We're going to go back in time anyway and relive everything, and you're going to love that. Well, the people that are listening will love that, and I reckon there's going to be a lot of people that are going to get heaps out of this because I've got like 8 huge parts here, and it's mega.
Okay.
It's a mega life you've had, and to be honest. As bad as it sounds, I'm shocked that you're here.
Really?
Yes.
Why?
Because of
why?
No, we will. You're going to tell me why, because it's not about me.
Yeah.
But no, I'm just sitting here going, how the fuck are you still here after everything you've done?
Actually, physically?
Physically, yeah. Are you here? Is this the hologram?
I am. No, I'm here.
Okay. Yeah. But, so, are you happy today?
I'm really happy.
And give me, what are the sort of parts of your life that excite you and make you really happy right now?
Biggest one would be waking up and feeling at peace in my body.
Mm-hmm.
Huge one. Feeling safe in my nervous system makes me really happy. And actually, as cheesy and corny as it sounds, still being alive at 35, because I didn't think I would be, makes me really happy.
Cool.
And my son.
Yeah. And do you want to mention anyone else?
I do have a wonderful partner. Yeah.
Yes.
He makes me happy, and to briefly speak to that. I was consciously not mentioning that because I don't want to take away from whether I'm with or without a partner. I am happy in who I am, and to be with a really strong, safe, gentle man amplifies that happiness.
Mm-hmm.
But a big part of my story is not relying on someone else to bring me that happiness, but he definitely amplifies it.
Fantastic. So take me back. We're going to go on this roller coaster now, and I'm already getting sweaty. Take me back to Jen.
Yeah.
As like a 15 to 18-year-old. I'm keen to know a little bit about your parents, because I feel like this journey couldn't have gone so haywire unless there was something there, but I might be wrong. So take me back to Jen at 15 to 18. I want to know a little bit about parents. I want to know a little bit about her, even what she looked like and what her dreams and goals were. And because obviously from 15 onwards, we're going to go on this massive ride that I even think is movie worthy. And half of it I don't even believe.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, that's how crazy it is. So take me there.
15-year-old Jen we'll put it this way to start, I was already medicated.
So take me further back then.
Yeah.
12? Medicated? 9
12
medicated?
not medicated, no. I seem to be going, or I always remember being quite melancholic as a child and a young girl, and I was never really sure why. I think I was am the youngest of 5 in a really big family, but for the most part, I had a pretty happy childhood. From the time I was in high school, things started to kind of unravel, and I suppose at 12, 13, when hormones kick in, when you have traumas begin to happen at that young, and I'd had some family members, some cousins one was in an accident. A cousin of mine sadly died by suicide when he was 13, so I was 13. It was the first time I'd sort of knew what that word was. I didn't know suicide until then. And I think when I look back on it, I think the people around me were also dealing with that trauma and grieving. They were so consumed by it, they didn't know how to help support the younger people grieving. And then I'd kind of gone through some body image stuff as a teenager. So loosely an eating disorder. I would say I was not diagnosed, but definitely restricting and not eating. And I think all of that's born out of wanting control in your life. And I think a lot of people will relate to that, especially women and young girls.
So just on that, you weren't eating enough because you wanted to be skinny?
I wanted to be thin. So it was and I think I don't think I'm any different to a majority of women would probably have gone through a phase where they thought that, identity-wise to fit in with people, or I suppose that begins, the narrative of you need to look a certain way to fit in. And when you're feeling already like an outsider, and I was already carrying a bit of grief that probably wasn't even mine, just energetically from other people in my family and what you're picking up on, and you find ways to cope with that. But I very quickly unraveled into sadness, and I remember probably year 8 and 9 wondering what the point was in life. And then very in quick succession, I had an uncle who passed away who was only 50. So these are my mum's siblings. So you have to remember, in context, she's losing these siblings too, and she's one of 16. So there's a lot of them. And then a couple of months later, an aunt passed away, and she was only 40. So by that stage, I was in year 10, and I'd already gone to funeral, lots of grief in the family, and then school pressures, and trying to make sense of all these academic pressures and friendship group, society pressures, and where do I fit in all of that, and how do I make sense of going to school, writing an essay about Shakespeare and being like, man, I just been to 3 funerals and I got other shit going on at home with my other siblings who weren't coping. You just kind of like, what the fuck? So that was, in a nutshell, there was all that happening. So by the time I was 15, I was pretty depressed, and I was in treatment with a psychiatrist who medicated me for depression.
Who took you to the site? Was that your parents?
My parents.
So they were just going, well, she's a bit off the rails.
Well, I'd begun self-harming.
And take me through that.
So with self-harming began as a response to punishment for not eating, for eating rather. So if I had eaten, I would punish myself by hurting myself as a way to remind myself that was bad behavior eating.
So explain that to me. How are you hurting yourself? Are you
I was a self-harmer by way of cutting
Do you cut your skin with just a knife?
with a razor, yeah.
With a razor?
Yeah.
Just anywhere or?
It was in places where it was strategically hidden. So when you're going to school, you have to. I was considering things like swimming carnivals, like So often it would be on places where you couldn't see, but in the end, it was such a cry for help. Obviously, in hindsight, when I look at it, but I still live now as a 35-year-old with very visible scars on my arms and legs from that 15-year-old.
So what's the thought process? Do you eat a donut and just go, I'm bad, and you straight away get the razor out and you start cutting yourself? Is that?
Look, to be honest, I don't think there really is a thought process, and I can't really remember that 15-year-old thought process. What I know now as a 35-year-old in all that I've gone through is that self-harm is a result of extreme overwhelm in emotion and not being able to regulate or feel safe in any environment to talk about those feelings. So it's a release of burden and pain and feeling. And I was very stoic, and I still am very stoic with getting emotional. I still am working on softening because I have spent a lifetime of trying to carry calm and control with my emotions. But I think when I think back to that child then, all of that was happening unconsciously without me knowing. And it was a real physical expression of the pain that I was carrying that I couldn't articulate. But what we do learn, and back then, 2003, 4, 5, we didn't have a lot of information about mental health still. It wasn't a part of the conversation. It was also very naughty behavior. I was a naughty child for doing that.
For self-harming.
I definitely, the response from my family and parents was very much, absolutely fear, but also it's not a great representation of the family. And we were very much a family that wanted to present as this great unit, which we were, but still very much that image of not showing people what was really happening emotionally.
So do you get caught self-harming yourself? Is that how the parents took you for help?
Yeah.
How does that happen? Are you in the bedroom cutting yourself and she walks in, or?
I think one of my siblings probably saw some scars on my arms, and I can't really recall, but I do think it was one of my sisters who then brought the attention to my mum, who also had difficulty regulating as a mother. So her response was absolute distress and anger. So I suppose not being conscious at the time, but the desired result would have probably been that I needed love and support and safety. And instead it was, this is not okay. Something's wrong with you. You need to go and get help.
So what did your mum do for a living? And your dad?
Both my parents were teachers.
Really?
Yeah. High school. Mum was high school. Dad's primary school.
Just not very affectionate family?
Incredibly affectionate. Very close to the point of, and this is what trauma does, completely enmeshed family. Like almost blind loyalty, enmeshment, no boundaries, but none of that you realize until later. You start to look at the patterns that you're creating in your other relationships in life, and you kind of go, where the fuck does this all come from? So it took me a really long time to realize I had quite a toxic family, but that actually was I imagine a lot of people grew up in families like that. They're very loving. I didn't ever feel unloved. But the way that they loved was, I guess, the way of the generation. You know, they would say, I love you and hug you and stuff, but very much discipline, very strict, control. Also, there was that compliance and obedience sort of thing with parenting, which I think these days we're moving away from with more conscious parenting and as they would say, gentle parenting. But it was very much like, you'll listen to me, you'll do as I say.
So it was very loving, but you couldn't go to them with all your problems and fears and depression and stuff.
No, and I understand in context now that they were also from a generation where they were dealing with their own traumas. You know, so as you grow up and as you become a parent and a mother yourself, you realise, you can see on a macro level, you're seeing all the generational traumas come through. I love my parents. They did the best they could under the circumstances and resources and tools that they had, right? So this is no way, I don't blame them. It's just context to help me understand why my behaviour may have been a certain way at the time.
So then you're given all this meds.
Yep.
And you're 15. How do we go from 15 on some meds to rehab and psych wards? Take me through that sort of journey and...
really quick, easy transition. So you're taking meds. So I was taking antidepressants and also they'd given me sleeping tablets by the time I was 16. I misused them almost immediately.
So what's misuse?
Misuse them. So I would hide them and then store them and then take too many because I very quickly... so a couple of them were attempts at taking my own life or doing harm to myself in terms of overdosing.
How did you know that that was the way to take your life?
By that stage, I was probably on back when they didn't have, like Facebook hadn't really started yet and things like that, but definitely I'd started using the internet to seek out those dark corners of the internet where there are forums that give you advice and encourage you. And that was back in mid-2000s.
So are you telling people you're going to take your life, or are you one of those?
Absolutely not.
And are you still at school?
Yep.
And you're taking all these meds, sleeping tablets, just to get through?
Yeah. But then I had, there were social issues, but then I got into a group of friends that were quite popular. I guess in the group, I never really felt like I fit in with them, but they were, a lot of them were really good friends and dear friends, and some of them now are still my dear friends. But they were in the drinking drug scene. So that's how, from year 9, 10 onwards, that's how I got into alcohol. So I was already on antidepressants and sleeping tablets. Then I started binge drinking, but lying about that to my parents so they'd think I was at a sleepover doing that kind of stuff. But you're really in a park with a bag of goon and a passion pop. And
typical Aussie night out.
Right, yeah.
Take me back to wanting to take your life.
Which time?
Well, let's go to the first time. I'm trying to understand the thought process. So you've done all the research and you've gone, okay, if I take this many pills, blah, 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 I've got a good chance of not waking up.
Yes.
Is that what you're thinking?
Yeah.
So what's the thought process at that point in time to go, well, I don't want to wake up tomorrow. Life is that bad that I've researched it. If I take 10 of these and 5 of these and do whatever, I'm not going to wake up. Is that... I genuinely, there are a couple of times where I never really wanted for it to be the end, but my thought process at the time was definitely, I just want this feeling to stop.
So it's what now I identify as escapism that began very early. And that is a common theme in my life and was a theme in my life. Though you realize when you're seeing doctors and therapists and psychiatrists, it is an attempt to take your own life. But I don't think I ever really wanted to exit fully. I just didn't want to feel what I was feeling. And there seemed to be no way of support. I just was like, I don't want to feel like this. I just want to be numb. Like, kind of just wanted to be in a coma.
So when you say the feeling, what's the feeling?
The feeling was pain, hurt, sadness, which now I understand is grief, and not feeling safe.
So what's so bad in your life at that point in time? What do you remember?
Loneliness. And that's hard to say. As a 15-year-old, that's probably like everyone's lonely, you know? But I had a lot of friends. I had a lot of cousins. I had siblings. At the time, it was very much, I didn't know if you were like born or bred, you know, like is this a genetic thing? We didn't know much about mental health. We didn't know if it was genetic. I didn't know that I had a predisposition to substance abuse or alcoholism. Nobody in my family talked about things like that. But they are very prevalent in my family. So in on both sides. So it's hard to say, you know, why you feel that way. I think it's a compilation of things.
So how bad did the substance abuse get?
It got
at its peak.
Yeah, at its peak. Like I was using prescription drugs, or misusing them, abusing them, getting them off other people when I couldn't get more refilled. And then that quickly turned into party drugs when I was sort of 16, 17, 18. I was already living out of home by the time I was 17. So I had a lot more freedom to do, and I was working full time, so I had the money to do, you know, I had the freedom and the money. And not really much maturity or intelligence, probably. Like I had some intelligence, but you're still making such poor choices at that time. So then I realized alcohol and drugs were really great at making me feel euphoric and feeling better. And I felt that way all up until probably up until I was about 18. And then my brother died by suicide. Yeah.
So what's first? I do want to talk about your brother, but what's first? Is it rehab and then the psych wards, or are they at the same time? And who admits you to those?
So the first admission I had was involuntary. So I was put on a section, I forget what they called it. It could be a section 72 or something, but a 72-hour hold. So that's when the authorities or the doctor deems that you're at risk to yourself or others. So
how do you get to that stage though? Does someone say?
I had a serious suicide attempt at 17 when I was living out of home, and I was fortunate enough that I'd taken a lot of medication, and I'd also cut open a vein that was very serious.
Did you know what you were doing?
No, I was pretty clouded by medication and very overwhelmed, but I did ring my sister to ask for help.
Before you did it, or?
As I was bleeding on the floor. And she rang an ambulance and they came, and that attempt...
Did you research that attempt?
No, but that attempt came after I was prescribed another medication, a new medication that later I found out I couldn't process with an enzyme deficiency that I have. And so you're more likely to experience suicidal ideation, which is something they don't talk about with medication a lot, but one of the side effects of antidepressant medications, depending on how your chemistry and your makeup processes SSRIs, it can do the opposite. It can make you more suicidal.
So you're on all this medication though, and drinking and doing drugs, and then you just get to a point where you go, I can't do this anymore, or you just weren't thinking clearly? Like, did it build up to that point where you thought, I want to leave this earth?
It was an everyday fight that I was struggling against. And often I couldn't understand it at the time. But when you have intrusive thoughts that take over your brain that are telling you that this is too hard or you're not good enough, or and it's really challenging for me to go back into that headspace. So I am speaking to it from the perspective I have now, but I would say it was an everyday struggle that I was that I was trying to overcompensate for or work through, and then it just gets too hard.
Did you want to go to rehab?
Yeah.
It was something that crossed your mind.
Yeah.
I've got to fix this.
I
So
knew
you still had that
yeah.
clear eyes to think, I've got to get out of this.
I have fortunately always had a part of me somewhere that has had such a strong desire to live and fight, which I now know is who I am.
And what's rehab like?
Depends which
What
one
goes
you go
on?
to, public or private. Private's a lot better.
What do they do there?
A lot of group therapy.
Mm-hmm. Are you detoxing at the same time?
Yeah, a couple of times I was put in psych units first and then transferred, so I detoxed in psych units.
Tell me about psych units. This is the part I'm interested about.
What do you want to know?
I feel like it's like the movies, everyone in coats and stuff and sitting around, and there's Jimmy in the corner that's like...
Well, when I was 17, I was put in a public psych unit, and this experience is why I ended up getting private healthcare. Because as a 17-year-old young girl, I was put into a psych unit in a room with 4 single beds and 3 male adults and me, because that's all the funding that they had at the time. There were styrofoam cups to eat cereal out of. They didn't have bowls and things like that. I was in an acute ward, so no shoelaces, no doors that lock, no bed sheets, bed on the floor. That's pretty traumatic at 17.
And what are these guys like in there? Are they loose cannons? Are they...
Well, they're unwell. And I didn't interact with them, but I do remember waking up one night and one of them standing at the end of my bed, just staring at me. And then I couldn't sleep properly after that.
Wonder why.
Yeah. So my parents very quickly organised private health cover after that. And then from then, anytime I had treatment, it was in a private health facility, which is much more... It's much safer, but there's also a hell of a lot more drug access in rehab, and you're in a position to be connecting with people who are unwell and who may not want help. Yeah.
So what are you thinking, being put into a shrink ward?
I'm thinking...
Can't be great mentally.
I'm thinking that it's validating everything I think about myself negatively, which is that I'm crazy or I don't belong in society or I'm not well. I was also separated from my family in that way.
How old are you?
17, 18.
17, 18, you're in and out of rehab and also in a shrink ward. You wouldn't have a lot of friends at that point in time, would you?
I had some very close friends that would visit me and support me. They cared a lot, but I imagine they wouldn't have said it to me, but I imagine it was just really frustrating and hard for them to understand. A lot of people probably eye rolled, like, again, like, get your shit together, because they're starting to finish school and move to uni, and so there is a disconnect in also, like, who wants to be around that kind of energy. So you start to make friends with people in there,
in
which is
rehab,
dangerous.
and
yeah,
they become your
and
mates.
relationships.
Yeah, okay. And you, I've got this timeline and it's still crazy. Do you go in there after, so your brother commits suicide?
He dies by suicide is the correct language.
Is it? Dies by suicide?
Commit suggests it's got negative connotations, and it's, the correct language to use is died by suicide. We don't,
So he died by suicide?
Yes.
Is this before all this, or is it during?
This is kind of during. So he's a New South Wales police officer. He's only young. He was 26 when he died. He's experiencing his own sort of trauma stuff in the police force. He gets put on medication. He gets put on restricted duties because he's not coping.
Are you guys talking at this time?
Yeah.
And you're both going through similar...
Yes, which is why when he died, the night that he died, he rang me and spoke to me about it. And I knew he did that because I understood. And I remember saying that to him on the phone.
Did you know he was going to do it?
Yeah, he was. They were looking for him at the time.
And you were talking to him?
And he rang me, yes. So they were looking for him. They knew he had his gun. He was on duty. They ended up triangulating his phone to find him. Because of the phone call I made with him, they were able to locate him.
Do you think if you were more of a sound mind at the time, you could have stopped it?
That's a really big question, and some days I go over that, but ultimately I'm comfortable and at peace with the place that where I am now in my thinking is that you can't I couldn't have stopped it. And I would do my head in if I went over and thought that if I was in that situation now with the knowledge that I have then, and that experience was so pivotal in my life, it was life altering and life changing. Now I would feel I could manage that situation better because I have the skills and the mental health sort of first aid. Would that have stopped him or someone else? I can't say.
What would you do today, though, if he called you now and similar conversation?
If he called me, I don't think he would be in a position to ring me and call me. I think it would have started earlier in a conversation and taking it seriously when someone is saying they're not doing well and not doing that, oh, just pull your socks up, like, you'll be right, like, go into this. I very much now take very seriously when someone tells me, if they tell me that they're not doing well with their mental health and that they have thought about suicide. And I don't mean to go into panic mode or crisis mode where you're like, oh my God, like, we got to get you locked up somewhere. I think it's like, I know much more about asking the right questions. Do you have a plan? Have you thought about how you're going to do it? Have you thought about when you're going to do it? Can we talk more about how you're feeling now? I know how to explore more in conversation to help ground someone. Back then at 18, and I remember I said this on the phone to him, and it haunts me, but it was telling of how I felt at the time. I said to him, please don't do this to me, because I can't. I so related to him wanting to exit this world. I was like, how can I help? What can I say? Because I just said, please don't do it to me, because if you go, then I'm here dealing with that on top.
So how's your mum? She's got you, and her son commits suicide.
Dies by suicide, yeah.
dies by suicide, and then I'll get that right,
Yeah.
and then her daughter's in a psych ward.
Mm.
She must be going through a lot, or is she not?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Guilt.
I'm sure she was. I wasn't living with her at the time. I was probably too wrapped in myself to be able to. I wasn't a mother yet as well.
Mm.
You know, it's very different. It was a very different experience when I became a mother, especially having a son. And then you have that empathy for your mum again. But her and my father were very strong with each other. But I think how mum got through it was she became an advocate for mental health and in the public eye for suicide prevention, for mental health first aid responders. They both were part of the parliamentary inquiry into some of that. They worked with Police Legacy and New South Wales Police to change things. They were actively the reason why they changed the criteria for the police wall of remembrance, in having officers die by suicide be remembered on the wall, because prior to that, so it was breaking the stigma. So I think, and she went back to work. Yeah, my dad couldn't. He stopped working. But he had music, so he's a singer-songwriter. And that's, I think, his grounding thing.
So, and you're in rehab, and do you get pregnant in rehab?
No.
You get pregnant to someone you met in rehab?
Yeah, I met my son's father in rehab.
Mm-hmm.
So we met him there. We were in there for maybe it was about 2 or 3 weeks together. And, you're having very emotional conversations with people in group settings. You get time in the smoker's yard to chat. You're having meals together. Like there's a real community there. And he felt like a really safe person. He was very protective, very emotional, very sensitive, and had gone through a lot too. So we connected, and that connection continued when we had both left. And then obviously...
Did that help you get out of rehab or the shrink ward, meeting someone and sort of feeling like, I guess, you were loved? Or
Yeah, absolutely. I was always seeking external validation and love and safety in men.
And was he there for drug use, or what was he there for?
I won't speak to that.
Okay.
That's his story.
Yeah, cool. But he was obviously there for something very serious.
He was
and
there
you
for
both
his
left at the same time.
Yeah.
And you have your son.
So that was 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And he's been sober ever since.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Excellent. All right.
So then I 3 weeks after I met him, I went to the doctor because I was feeling unwell, and they suggested I do a pregnancy test. And I remember thinking, couldn't possibly, I was like, don't think so. And then anyway, it came back that I was pregnant. So I went straight from that doctor's surgery to my son's father's doorstep and knocked on the door.
And he was pretty excited about it, or?
I was prepared, because I hadn't told anyone yet. And I was prepared. I knew I was prepared to do this. And I hadn't even really given that much thought. I turned 24 the next month, so I was nearly 24. But I went to his doorstep and I knocked on the door and I told him I was pregnant. And at this stage, I was still in the front door, and that I was going to have the baby. And I remember him running into the lounge room of his mum's home where he lived, and I heard him say, "Mum, I'm going to be a dad." And I was sitting at the front door like, oh, fuck, like, he's in on this. Because I wasn't expecting that.
Mm.
And to his credit, he's been in sick from day one. And I remember he said something along the lines of, like, you know, so how's this going to work? Like, do you move in here? Like, and I was like, oh, whoa, like.
Let me have the kid
we
first.
we didn't really know each other, so it was like, just trust me that we will do better at this co-parenting than if we get into a relationship and try and make this work.
How long were you together
We did.
at that stage?
But we weren't together.
Okay.
I mean, like, we weren't.
You weren't boyfriend and girlfriend?
Well, no, I wouldn't
Just
have
pregnant.
That. Yeah.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
I feel like this is like we're out of the woods with Jen, but you're not. I've got a whole page of
I know.
more roller coaster, and I feel like this is a crowning glory. And you're out of rehab, you've met someone, you're about to have a kid, and then I've got in my notes here, I've got DV, sexual assault, living in your car without your son, sober, not sober,
So
escapism.
for timeline,
we're 10 years ago. How does it all unravel?
well, for timeline, I guess too, for context, my brother died in March 2009. 3 weeks before that, I had been sexually assaulted 3 weeks before my brother died.
Where at?
Where was I assaulted at?
Was it this is in rehab or not?
No. This was in Sydney, in the city.
While you're in the peak of drugs and drinking and
living out of home, yeah. And then 3 weeks later, my brother died. So for context, it was like bang bang.
yeah, okay.
So it took me many, many years to deal with the sexual assault, and I'd gone to the police and things like that, and reported it. But then my brother died, and that became more.
So you just shoveled it under the carpet because you had something.
It was just that was more worse, you know.
Mm.
So that kind of the trauma from the assault, I hadn't even really processed because it was just put on the back burner. Because then.
Do you still remember the sexual assault, or have you pretty
Yes.
much?
You don't, and you don't ever forget that.
Mm.
Yeah.
Was anything done about that?
No,
No.
they couldn't. I didn't know who did it, and they couldn't locate.
What did you take away from that?
It's probably when my injustice rage in the system started,
Mm.
which and want to change the system.
Did you blame some of that on yourself? The sexual assault?
Absolutely, yeah. I still will carry around part of me thinking, had I made better choices, had I not been under the influence, had I not been alone down a street, had I had more money to get a cab instead of walking, all those things I felt were my choices. But I've done enough work on that now to know at no stage of that assault was any of that my fault.
Mm. And what about, you mentioned when we chatted initially about domestic violence, when did that appear?
That appeared later, so that was very recent, so 2022, and I left that relationship very quickly in 2023.
And how did that all begin? What does that look like? What does domestic violence look like?
Looks very different for a lot of people, but for me it was slow and then very quick. I was only in the relationship for a year, but very, very early on, what it looked like were red flags that I missed and allowed, that I knew intuitively And a lot of fear as well of knowing I'd made a mistake being in this relationship and not knowing how to get out of it. And I moved states, and I'd moved my son from
You moved states after it
to
was
be
all done?
with that person.
Oh, to be with that person.
Yeah. So there was a lot like relying on that.
Out of Queensland or
out.
into Queensland?
Into Queensland.
Yeah, okay.
I moved from New South Wales to Queensland.
To be in the relationship and then it's all spiralling.
It looks like a lot of...
Is it physical?
Physical violence, sexual violence, financial control. There was a lot of drinking involved.
By you as well?
By me, then so after 8 years of sobriety, I entered that relationship and started drinking.
And is your son witnessing all the abuse and everything, do you think? Mental and the physical and verbal?
I don't think he was... I did the best I could to keep him away from that. He was spending time with his dad as well at the time. So there were a lot of the time that the abuse happened was when my son was away. So when my son was there, it was actually almost like a protection in a way, which is pretty heavy. But absolutely he has trauma just from the way my nervous state was and the tension. And he was too young to probably articulate it, but I definitely saw the impact of that come out in his behaviors, because when I left that relationship and when I started to get therapy and get my shit again and get sober again, he began to thrive. And I could very much draw the link between getting us to a safer place, getting me healthy and mentally well, directly contributed to my son thriving and his behaviours changing. And yeah, it was remarkable, incredibly humbling to be like, fuck, like you're putting that trauma onto him without even realising that.
And so why did you start drinking? You had 8 years off and you got into a relationship and decided he drinks, I'll drink.
Well, I was in a relationship for a couple of years with a very good man. And that ended just because we wanted different things. I probably still had in my head that I wanted like a nuclear family. I still, at the time, had that idea in my head that would mean I was doing well and was successful to be married with kids and having a home. But that relationship broke down. It was very mutual, but I was very heartbroken and sad, and once again that the same themes of grief and pain and loneliness that I had back then came back, and I kind of got a case of, I guess, the fuck it, and was like, fuck it, I'm gonna have a drink because I don't want to feel like this, especially then when I started to go back out on the sort of like online dating scene again, because you get lonely and you want to rebound or whatever. It was much easier to drink and have dates and conversations and things like that. But I suppose I'd forgotten when I got comfortable. Like for 8 years, I was sober, no drugs, no alcohol. And that was really attributed to having my son. Like the moment I left that rehab and then fell pregnant back in 2014, it was a game changer. Like for a purpose, for the straight and narrow, clear thinking. I was working full time. I was doing therapy. So COVID was we were just kind of coming out of COVID. That relationship had ended. I was working full time. I worked all through COVID. And I went back to drinking, and then I met someone in Sydney he lived in Queensland, and we did long distance for a bit, and then I threw all my eggs in one basket and thought, this is the person I'm going to be with. And he was a heavy cocaine user, And so that he introduced that back into my life, which again, I am thinking, oh, it's just recreational, or it's only when I don't have my son, or, but I had forgotten just how strong addiction is. And when you already have that in your genes and you're already predisposed to that and have already used that as a coping method, then when the red flags in that relationship escalated with physical violence and sexual violence and the coercive control that had happened at the time, and being isolated from my work and family and things like that with him, drugs and alcohol then became the escape. And I remember thinking, if I drink more, this will hurt less physically.
So what's sexual violence? How does that look? Is that a male forcing you to have sex against your will? Is it no different to rape, or?
I suppose it's different when there were definitely times where you could call it rape. I'm sure legally it would be called that.
Mm-hmm.
It's a really fine line, I think, to name that, because it wasn't that I didn't want to be having, like, the sex may have began as consensual, but then behaviors that come through that, particularly there was a lot of strangulation involved, where I was strangled to the point of unconsciousness, and then you wake up and things are happening and you think, well, that's where that is the sexual violence. I didn't ask to be strangled. There wasn't consent around that. I may have wanted to have sex in the first place, but I didn't want X, Y, and Z to follow. But then later that also became away from the bedroom. And as I know now, and a lot of people know, strangulation is a precursor for homicide. It's pretty fucking serious. And I had stopped going to work because of what it was physically doing to my face. He was also physical with his hands and with, so there was bruises and things that I had then started to work from home, because that was the thing we could do. And then I couldn't cope at all. I was trying to go into work and still be really happy and bubbly. And
do you think that all would have happened if you were sober still during that relationship? Do you kind of, look, this is a harsh thing to say, but do you kind of blame yourself because you got back into drugs and drinking?
Absolutely.
And you really just...
And I don't say blame. I think I take absolute accountability for the positions that I've put myself in, because I think that's important. And that's not to take away from that. None of that behavior is okay from a man. But I have to be honest with myself about accountability and my choices that put me in those positions. And I think there's a lot of guilt and shame that I carry and that I am working with, and actively when I talk about doing shadow work, that's what I talk about. I talk about processing that guilt and shame about what I didn't know at the time and what I was doing at the time out of survival, that you don't even realize you're doing out of survival, even if they're poor choices like drugs and alcohol.
So what part of all this is this living out of your car and not being able to see your son, is that after all this?
Yes, yeah.
So you obviously are back taking drugs, you're drinking, you have this terrible relationship.
Yeah.
And then how does it go to you living in your car? Is it you pretty much running from this individual?
Because I was living in the same home with that individual, and DV, when you're dealing with police and courts and things like that, it takes time. That individual had more money than I did and had taken quite a lot of my money from our joint accounts and things like that. And in the interim, and I didn't have anyone that I knew up here. That was the other thing. I didn't know anyone where I was. It was just me. He'd taken my car from me, and so at this stage the police were actively looking for him and trying to find this person. So I didn't have a car. My family had found out and were trying to drive up. My son's father had no idea that any of this was happening until the shit hit the fan, and I was and there was police and ambulance involved. And I rang him and told him I'm in serious trouble and I need help, and he dropped everything and was incredibly supportive, but at the same time incredibly protective of his son. So when the dust sort of settles, he takes our son to look after him, so that it's kind of one less thing I'm having to, because I didn't know where I was going to stay. I was trying to find a caravan park to stay in, but they're still incredibly expensive. My parents had come up and helped me organize some things, but I still couldn't get a rental. I ended up eventually getting a rental, but in between that time, I tried to stay with my son's father. That didn't work out for the both of us. So I was like, he takes Noah, looks after Noah until I get a place. Also, there was a lot of legal stuff between he and I at the time, because obviously he's trying to work out, am I well? Am I sane of mind? What's my son been in? You can imagine as a father not knowing. So there was a lot of trust blown.
Are you well at that time?
At that time, no. It was
Is it deja vu for you?
Yeah, weird deja vu though, because now I'm a mother. And you think when you become a mother, you kind of think you're absolved of, I would never do that. You know, we're all quick to judge as parents. We're all quick to go, I would never do that. I would never take this. I would never put my son in that situation. I never thought I was going to be that person. And there I was, sitting on the step at a caravan park going, how have I got here? I'm incredibly intelligent. None of that seemed to matter. Like, the intelligence behind it mattered. And I realized very quickly I needed to get clear-minded. I needed to get clarity. And the only way I could do that was to get sober. I knew that the best thing for my son and the hardest thing as a mother to do was that he be with his father, who I knew where he was safe, so that I could go and do that. So I kind of still had the wits about me to go, this is short-term, temporary pause in order to be a better person and a better mother and a well person for long term.
And that was what, a year ago?
No, it was almost 2 years ago now.
2 years ago.
So I'm just over 18 months sober. So, yeah, so 18 months, 19 months ago.
Cool.
Yeah.
We're going to have to unwind this soon. What are we? 59 minutes.
It's a lot to fit into an hour.
I know. I've got 3 questions I want to ask you before we wrap up. And they're easy ones.
Okay.
You can have a break.
Mm-mm.
So you go 18-year-old.
We should do a part 2.
It would take forever, wouldn't it?
No,
We'd
but
go
I feel
5
like
hours.
part 1 should be like, this is my life
I might break
story.
it into 2. Don't worry. So 18-year-old Jen is sitting here right now.
Yeah.
What do you tell her? How do you help her? What advice do you give her? Let's call it 15-year-old Jen. It's probably more.
I would tell her, you are so loved. You're so loved, and this is temporary. And life gets better. Your life gets better. but you learn so much because of how hard it is.
You know what's interesting? I asked that question for everyone, and I reckon 90% of people have said that first line. Unbelievable. It just shows. A lot of people say, I just want to tell myself I am loved. So interesting. What about someone similar in your position at the moment? How can you help them?
In the position that I was in?
Yeah.
In relation to DV, drugs, alcohol?
Geez, we could go anywhere. Let's start with more how it all started in terms of the drugs, medication.
I would definitely...
The school period.
Yeah, I would highly recommend talk therapy before medicating anybody, particularly when they're young. One of the biggest saviors of my life has been therapy and talk therapy. So group setting talks where you share, AA and NA, where you share, one-on-one therapy, support, talking. You just talk about it.
Mm-hmm. So get a shrink, go to rehab, AA.
I mean, that's if there's drug and alcohol addiction there, because addiction needs to be treated. Mm-hmm. It's a disease. And in order to treat that addiction, there's a lot of undoing of belief systems. There's a lot of value work. There's a lot of patterns that you have to undo. A lot of inner child stuff that you do. But yeah, I think my biggest thing is talk. Mm-hmm. Talk to people who love you, talk to people who listen to you. Yeah. So
if your son listens to this one day, what do you hope he takes away from your journey?
I hope he takes away that we are all human. We have a common humanity, which is suffering, and that we all want to be loved. And that your life should not be measured in terms of success and unsuccess, or failure and winning. That you should look at your life in terms of, when I make mistakes and when I fail, what do I learn from that, and how do I grow, and how do I continue to move forward? And that I want him to know that it's okay to make mistakes. It's so you can change. You can work on yourself. And I think, a lot of people feel really stuck because they're scared to change. They're scared to be different from who they were. They're scared to talk about things that make them look like a bad person. They're scared to go there and address and take accountability for ego and making bad choices. And I would want him to know, and other people to know, like the first step in healing and recovering from anything is putting your hand up. Mm-hmm. And I'm the first person to go, I don't have the fucking answers. I've got a little bit of a blueprint that's a lived experience that is working for me, that it's an everyday thing that I'm working on. But everyone, it's really easy to be a winner when you get things and you come first, or you're successful, or you do a business and it works out well, or you have a relationship and it's going great. Like, it's really easy to fucking be a winner, but can you be a failure and do that really fucking well and come back from that and transform that into something? Like, when I look back at my life, I think, God, I've fucked up on so many things, but what I've gained from that, and knowing, like, I know I have so much grit and tenacity and resilience. That's, for me, winning. Because I don't know if a lot of people could do what I've done and take accountability and responsibility and be an active part of your recovery and healing. and still step out and show your face and show up and talk and not want to hide in a hole.
So as we wind up, what's one word for your life? One word. Just one.
This is a really hard one because I've got a few words.
I've got one in my head for you.
Do you?
Yeah.
I had one, but now that you asked me this question,
What's the first thing that came to your mind, though?
Remembrance.
Really? Why?
I suppose, and we didn't get to talk too much about it, but I know because I've done a lot of shadow work on myself. But I suppose remembering who I am, and by that I mean what my values are. Remember who you are, what you value, because a lot of all that shit that I went through is because I had no values. I had no idea what my value system was. I had to change it and do a lot of work on identifying what that looked like. And I suppose it's that remember who you are, remember what you have gone through. Like there's a remembrance. It's like sacred to me, my life story, talking about this. There's this reverence and remembrance that I have where it's like, just, because a lot of people like, just forget about those things, or that's not who you are anymore, you don't. And I think, no, I need to remember who I am. I need to remember all this shit has happened to me, and I still get up, and I still am grateful, and I still fight for the underdog and for adversity, and I still fucking love, and I love life. And to have gone through what I've gone through and still love so deeply and want to live and I just want to make other people feel like it's okay. I got you. I'm in your corner. Whatever you've gone through, mate, I got you. It's okay. And you're not alone. And you are worth it. You're worth living and fighting for. You're worth going, I fucked up. I want to start again. And I say that to my son all the time. Sometimes I just say to him, do you want to just start again? If we're in the middle of an argument or something, and I just go, let's just stop. We both made mistakes. Let's just start again.
I love that.
And
my
we do.
word would be resilience.
We do. Because it's a choice. It's what it comes down to. You can just choose to be different.
Thank you, Jen.
Thanks.
I have a little logic in life, and you have lived that logic I have. I've always said life is full of test days. Everyone can do fucking easy days. We can all do easy days.
Yeah.
Everyone can. But every now and then I think life throws you test days, and they're the days where I think 50% of people just don't get through them.
Buckle.
And you've got through all of them. And I think resilience for me is something that just sits in my mind. You remind me of my mum a lot, who went through a heap. And I think so resilient, but she loved the test days. And you've loved the test days.
I do too.
You've had so many test days. None have beat you yet.
But not only that, now is what's really refreshing from where I was at 15 and 18, like to now, is now I'm like, let's fucking go. Because I know whatever life has got for me, I got it.
I think life's done enough now.
That's
I don't
the
think it's
beauty
got
of
anything left
life
for
is
you.
that it's as soon as you get a little bit too comfortable, life goes, I'm ready all the time. I'm ready to learn. Now I'm like, bring it. I want the lesson. I want the opportunity. I want the challenge, and I'm not scared of it.
And life, your universe gives its toughest battles to its toughest warriors. So you're a tough motherfucker.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jen.
Thank you.
That was great.
I know.
Out.
Peace out.